in terms of international foreign economic issues, there is an increasing sense, and we should see this coming out fairly soon, that although technical discussions on free trade and visa regimes will likely continue with the European Union, that the closing of the deal will become subject to political considerations. There's an increasing sense within European institutions that this is the likely approach. And as we see this, the potential of a blockage on the Western integration, the firewall with Russia is slowly breaking down. The areas where in April and May Ukraine was resisting are now increasingly open to either acquisition or to integration. And we've seen recent integration projects in the area of aerospace, energy, metallurgy, and of course the long-standing Russian presence in media and telecoms. The concern here, there are two aspects of it. In one sense, there are latent capacities, Soviet-era capacities, that are being rebuilt. And this is what Putin rebuilt Russia on, putting the pieces back together of the system that had fallen apart. There are potential benefits in the short run for those industries in having deals with their Russian counterparts, rebuilding the pieces of what had fallen apart. It's not clear, however, that that's going to be done on a matter of parity, and that if that really will give Ukrainian enterprises a long-term positive prospect. In reality, we may see an increasing effort, as we've seen in energy, to gain control over lucrative areas and use that to help solve Russian resource problems while leaving Naftogaz with the debts. And then the final issue, the last on this, there was an increasing impression that on major deals there was a Russian veto. There was a major aerospace deal that fell through, and I've been told that it fell through under considerable pressure, a Ukrainian-U.S. deal, considerable pressure from Russia, and that this, very soon after this, the Ukrainian company made a joint venture with their Russian counterpart. So this kind of pressure is there, and it's unclear that the current government is going to be in a position to resist it, absent if the European direction is going to be politically blocked. And the final issue, then, too quickly, because I know we're running, I'm standing between you and lunch, which is a bad place to be. The first is, if the other aspect of the political administrative vertical, the stability that has been the moniker for the current authorities, that seems to be a weak point, is the creation of an effective civil service. As we've looked at cadre policy over the last few months, loyalty has seemed to be on a premium, and a number of the people, in fact, if you look back, the first people who were sent to jail have not been opposition leaders, but in fact were senior civil servants who were nonpartisan. This sent a warning across the civil service that the number one factor was loyalty. We've also seen I think, a return to the potential of shadow government. And in this, I won't go into great detail because I know I'll be stealing Morgan's thunder, but the grain export embargo, if you look at the beginning of it, the initial steps to restrict grain export were administrative, and they were issued by department heads about restricting train transport or loading of barges, and it's unclear where these orders originated. This return to shadow government, I think, is a particular concern if we start looking at the reorientation of the security system, with the potential of increased internal repression, increased corruption, and if your third priority is getting your job done, I don't know how many times you get to your third priority, but I don't very often. There are also reports that the expertise for this issue, for repression is not in Kiev. And so this creates a difficult situation for the government. I have heard reports that that Kiev militia are now using tactics that are previously used in Moscow for isolating small groups of protesters, for example. And there are reports that advisory relationships being built, particularly with the SBU. Advisory relationships in and of themselves aren't a bad thing, but the question is what sort of advice is being transferred. And the final issue then, I think, is to look at external relations. There certainly is a quieting of a tone in the relations with Russia, and that's a good thing. But we haven't really seen a let-up of pressure. We see increasing penetration of the economy, potentially state administration, and it's fair to say the risks of de-sovereigntization continue. At the same time, I think the West, it is fair to say that there's a loss of strategic interests. We continue with sincere efforts to work on issues of common interest, but it's unclear that those common interests are underpinned by common values. And this is likely to limit, or risks limiting, the ability for the West, for the U.S., for the European Union to work constructively over the long term with Ukrainian partners. So the risk is that we will find ourselves increasingly irrelevant in influencing Ukraine, positively influencing the development, its development model. I believe it was Larry, you mentioned democracy as a currency. I really like that point. I think one of the things we should think about is how do we help make that currency more convertible? How do we help make it clearer that that currency contributes to economic or to security improvement? And also, how do we look at ensuring that we've been very bad in the past when we've had a challenge of dealing with Ukraine and showing a commitment to the country, but are having difficulties with its leadership of differentiating the two. So I think the thing that we need to be thinking about now is how do we, and I don't want to say this as a criticism or a prejudging of the government, but just reduce the exposure that U.S. policy has to future democratic development in Ukraine. I think we can look at doing it particularly by engaging other actors, civil society, the strategic community, business organizations, small, medium enterprises, the civil service. Once again, very positive to hear that this is the sort of thinking that's going on within the U.S. government. And I think also, though, we need to look, and here I would come back to today's hosts, the Washington Group in this event, at increasingly engaging and empowering the U.S. and the Western non-governmental sector. Not to be working through government with Ukrainian institutions and Ukrainian societies, but how the U.S. government, how U.S. society can engage more directly with our Ukrainian counterparts in society and attempt to use that as a stabilizing factor in what is still a very unstable time. Thank you.